In general, Gregory XIII was very much concerned not just with maintaining Catholicism in Europe, but really restoring it and spreading it as much as possible. And in doing so, he really did give the Counter-Reformation movement a more militant slant. On the night of the 23rd of August, 1572, there was a massacre of Huguenot, or French Protestant leaders, who had assembled in Paris for a royal wedding. That was the wedding of Henri of Navarre with the sister of King Charles IX, named Marguerite. The likely instigation for the massacre came from the Queen Mother. That was Caterina de' Medici. She was the mother of King Charles IX of France and the great-granddaughter of Lorenzo the Magnificent of Florence. And here she can be seen with her then-late husband, Henry II of France. Well, massacres of the Huguenots, thousands of them, followed throughout France. Well, Pope Gregory XIII was eager not just to promote Catholicism in Europe, but also to wipe out the Protestant movement. And as such, he not just endorsed, but positively blessed this massacre, known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre of French Huguenots. When news of the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in France of the Huguenots reached Rome, well, Pope Gregory XIII celebrated it with a Thanksgiving service expressly in the French National Church in Rome, San Luigi dei Francesi. Well, as it turns out, the famed painter Giorgio Vasari was commissioned to execute 3 frescoes in the Sala Regia of the Apostolic Palace of the Vatican, depicting the events, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Also, trophies from the war were displayed in St. Peter's, where the Frenchman Montaigne saw them. There was also a commemorative medal that Gregory XIII issued, with his portrait, as you can see on the obverse, and on the reverse a avenging angel with a sword in hand and the legend, the Massacre of the Huguenots. More generally in his papacy, Gregory XIII financially subsidized the Catholic League against the Huguenots, but still he was not able to get Catholic France to implement the decrees of the Council of Trent. Turning from France for a moment to Spain. The Pope's dealings with Spain are of special interest because remember he had a pre-existing link with King Philip II, and the Spanish king, in fact, had helped Gregory XIII achieve the papacy. Well, Pope Gregory positively encouraged Philip II of Spain to turn his attention to Ireland, and he hoped that this could serve as a base for an attack on the Protestant Elizabeth I of England. Elizabeth reigned from 1558 to 1603, and in fact she had tangled with Philip II in any number of ways, not least she had harbored Dutch freedom fighters fighting in their War of Independence to free the Netherlands of Spanish rule. Elizabeth I had been excommunicated in the year 1570 by a papal bull of Pope Pius V. Here's an English tract on the Pope's bull. Well, amazingly, at least to my mind, Gregory XIII financially supported an Irish-based rebellion in the years 1578 and 1579, and the notion was to launch from Ireland an invasion of England. Well, to cut to the chase, the policy toward England and Ireland failed. If anything, it increased the divide between Protestants and Catholics in the two countries. And finally, in the year 1580, English Jesuits stepped in and persuaded the Pope to moderate his stance. And in the end, Catholics were advised to obey the excommunicated Queen outwardly in all civil matters until such time as a suitable opportunity presented itself for her overthrow. Well, for Gregory XIII, England did not exactly pan out. Where he did have a clear success story was in Poland, however, which he maintained as a Catholic state very much with the help of the Jesuits. And this, in turn, established a link with the Christian communities of Ruthenia. Ruthenia is eastern Poland and the western Ukraine, and in fact, I'm proud to say that I am half Ruthenian. But Gregory XIII scored successes in Germany too. The new Holy Roman Emperor, as of 1576, was Rudolf II, and he started an alliance between the Habsburgs, the reigning dynasty of the Holy Roman Empire, and the Church, which was to last a full 2 centuries. And here too, from the year 1573, Gregory was assisted by the German congregation. This was a special commission of cardinals that was charged with encouraging, fostering Catholicism in Germany. Now, to keep things moving along, however, Gregory XIII occasionally had to turn a blind eye to some flaunting of decrees that had been set down by the Council of Trent. For instance, a single bishop accumulating multiple posts, something that was not uncommon in Germany at this time. There's a recent book by Richard Ninnis, which provides an in-depth study of the work of the German congregation and the situation in Germany precisely at this time, the 1570s and 1580s. Well, as you might imagine, in Germany in particular, the Pope, his representatives, the Catholic nobles, the clergy in general really had their work cut out for them. Here, just to show the tone, this is another medal from the run-up to the Council of Trent from the year 1543. Even though this medal was minted for the occasion of the opening of the Council of Trent, it was still in circulation a generation later. Here's a copy in silver that was making the rounds in Germany around the year 1580, and they're still deriding the Council of Trent. The obverse shows the face of a pope morphing into that of a devil, and the legend says, a perverted church has the face of Satan. And perversa here has a double meaning. It can also mean turned around 180 degrees. The reverse shows a cardinal that seems to be morphing into the body of a pig. The Latin motto, sapientes stulti aliquando, the wise men are sometimes the idiots, I think would probably be the best translation. And the real surprise is if you flip this 180 degrees itself, what you see is a demon and a joker. And this is just one very visceral reminder of the depth of anti-Catholic sentiment in the German states at this time. Gregory supported the Jesuits not only in Europe, but in missionary work as far afield as Brazil, India, China, the Philippines, and especially Japan, where the Jesuits had been since 1549. In 1582, Alessandro Valignano, whose technical title was Visitor to the Jesuit Mission in the East Indies, he sent 4 Japanese boys to Europe. 2 of these boys represented important Christian feudal rulers in Western Japan. The boys left Japan on the 20th of February, 1582, and they disembarked in Lisbon a full 2.5 years later, on the 11th of August, 1584. Then they traveled, explains Derek Massarella in a recent study of this expedition, through Portugal, Spain, and Italy as far as Rome, which was the high point of their journey, before they returned to Lisbon to begin the long voyage home on the 13th of April, 1586. They reached Nagasaki in Japan 4 years later, on the 21st of July, 1590. During the boys' travels in Europe, they had audiences and less formal meetings with Philip II, King of Spain, and also at that point King of Portugal, also with Pope Gregory XIII, and his successor, Pope Sixtus V. We really can call this the first Japanese embassy to the West. Derek Massarella explains the motives for the journey. The embassy, he says, was an integral part of Valignano's strategy for advancing the Jesuit mission in Japan. The boys chosen were intended to personify Jesuit success in Japan and also raise awareness of Japan in Europe amongst the clerical and secular elites. The embassy was further intended to impress upon the boys the glory, unity, stability, and splendor of Christian Europe, so that they might counter negative impressions of Europe left by Portuguese merchants and seamen in Japan. Alessandro Valignano later ordained the 4 envoys as the first Japanese Jesuit fathers, and one of the 4, Father Julian Nakaura, died a martyr by torture in Nagasaki in the year 1633, and he received beatification on the 24th of November 2008. We'll return to this important embassy later, for not one but 2 important artistic renditions of the Japanese embassy have appeared recently in the Villa Aurora. However, Pope Gregory XIII is especially famous for his reformation of the Julian calendar. You can see this in a Vatican postal issue here, celebrating the 400th anniversary of that event. And it wasn't just the Vatican Post that celebrated it. For example, here is the German Post doing exactly the same. The individual who specially helped Gregory XIII achieve this aim, well, was the Jesuit priest and astronomer Christopher Clavius, who is generally credited as the calendar's chief architect. Now, reforms to the calendar had been projected under earlier popes. But it was Gregory who saw to the completion of those reforms by a commission that met formally on the 24th of February, 1582. Here's the commemorative medal from that year, celebrating and marking the reform. The location where the calendar commission met, it was the papal Villa Mondragone. Once again, this is an example of branding with the dragon. This is a villa that Martino Longhi the Elder had built near Frascati. And here's how it appears today. The recommendations were some time in coming. Gregory first appointed the calendar commission in 1572, and in the meantime there were all sorts of other calendar reform proposals bouncing around. For the ultimate version, this papal commission explicitly credited the Calabrian astronomer Luigi Lelio, recently deceased. He, in turn, had drawn on earlier authorities. Now, the Julian calendar, named after Julius Caesar, introduced in the year 45 BC a solar calendar of 365 days, but every fourth year had 366 days. The reason for Gregory's reform was that the average length of the year in the Julian calendar was too long. In effect, it treated each year as 365 days, 6 hours in length. But calculations showed that the actual mean length of a year is slightly less, by 11 minutes. As a result, the date of the actual vernal equinox, in other words, the 21st of March, had slowly, over the course of 13 centuries, slipped from the 21st of March to the 10th of March. However, the calculation of the date of Easter still followed the traditional date, which was the 21st of March. All of this was verified by the observations of Christopher Clavius. So, it was necessary to drop 10 days to adjust it for greater accuracy. The new calendar was instituted when Gregory decreed, on a papal bull, dated the 24th of February, 1582, the papal bulls called Inter Gravissimas, amongst the most serious matters, that the day after Thursday, the 4th of October, 1582, would not be Friday, the 5th of October, but Friday, the 15th of October, 1582. In other words, the dates October 5th through 14th, 1582, were scrubbed. Now, the populace of Rome and elsewhere in Europe did not take this too kindly. They feared that it was an attempt, in fact, by landlords to cheat them out of a week and a half of rent. But more serious problems were at hand. The new calendar not just involved the dropping of those 10 days, the 5th through the 14th of October, but also a new rule for leap years. It was going to be every fourth even year, and also its century years that are divisible by 4, such as the year 1600 and, for that matter, 2000 would be a leap year. Well, Catholic states readily picked up the new calendar. Spain, Portugal, Poland, Italy, France, some states of the Dutch Republic, and various Catholic states in Germany and Switzerland. I mean, these are countries that were religiously split. Well, they followed suit within a year or two, and Hungary followed in the year 1587. But some Protestant states didn't follow suit for more than a century. For example, Denmark and the remaining states of the Dutch Republic, Protestant states of the Holy Roman Empire, and Switzerland, they adopted the Gregorian reform much later, the years 1700 and 1701. By this time, the calendar trailed the seasons by a full 11 days. As for Great Britain and its American colonies, well, they reformed their calendar only in the year 1752. In that case, Wednesday, the 2nd of September, 1752, was immediately followed by Thursday, the 14th of September, 1752. And the last Protestant holdout was Sweden, which joined on the 1st of March, 1753. However, I should also say that the Gregorian calendar was not accepted in Eastern Christendom for several hundred years, and then only as the civil calendar. For instance, as is well known, the Gregorian calendar was instituted in Russia by the Bolsheviks in 1917, so their October Revolution really occurred in November. Romania accepted it in 1919, Turkey under Ataturk in 1923. The last Orthodox country to accept the calendar was Greece, also in 1923. While some Eastern Orthodox national churches have accepted the Gregorian calendar dates for feast days that occur on the same date every year, the dates of all movable feasts, and Easter is the most important of these, they're still calculated in the Eastern Orthodox churches by reference to the Julian calendar of Julius Caesar. Later on, I want to return to Pope Gregory's calendar reform of 1582 and also his reception of the young Japanese envoys in 1585, but from a different perspective to show what role these events played in Boncompagni Ludovisi family tradition.